Okay, what we're doing today is porting cylinder heads, or really not really porting cylinder heads, but just cleaning up the intake and exhaust ports. And it's hard to really see on video, but there's a lip. You can see where the shiny machine part ends and the casting begins. There's like a little hill there. And what we want to do is we just want to break that edge, both here on this side of the port and then also on the other side that's harder for the camera to see. And we just want to create a smooth flow from the seat all the way down and through the port itself. And what we're going to start with is a carbide tip, and we're going to be extremely careful, just trying to just break this edge and possibly blend a little bit of this in there as well. So we can see, it's hard for me to film while I'm actually doing this. So we're going to, let's see, take the camera off and move over and look at this port that's already been done. You can see again a better transition. You can see where the steel of the seat's been cut and how it transitions into the aluminum. And then you can see over here on this side that this ridge has been reduced, also in here. And then again on the other side you can see those are all high points that were cut down with the carbide. We're going to come back with a sanding roll and smooth all this out. The other thing we have to do is this transition here. This is a ridge. You can kind of see the machining stops here, and then it's a very abrupt radius into the port itself. We're going to come back with our die grinder and just barely knock this down and do most of it with the smoothing. For the exhaust ports, they're fairly clean in through here. What we're going to do is knock down again the inner radius here. And we have to do this while not dare touching any of the seats, because that is what we need to save. And if we touch that, then we have to get a valve job, and that's going to cost a bunch of money we don't have for a Lemons car. All right, we're going to see how this works. I've got my eyepiece is down so I can see even better because I'm old. Okay, we've worked on the intake side again to just smooth the two kind of transition areas so that it's nice and smooth. You can feel it with your finger. For the tighter radius on the other side of the port, you can kind of see, you can see the lip here. We're going to go back in with our grinder and try to just barely, I mean, you're using really light. You're not really hogging anything out. Just really lightly come in here and just kissing it and coming back another pass. Very, very light on the tool, because what you don't want to happen is it to kind of get stuck in here and then start bouncing around. It'll chew up the seats, and then you've spent a bunch of money. Okay, so again, we're just trying to break this edge. We're just trying to increase this radius. You can see where I've come up and grind a little bit on the seat, but I did not dare touch the seat of the exhaust valve. And so again, just trying to make a nice smooth radius from this seat all the way in and through the port itself. Same thing for the exhaust again, and starting just trying to increase this radius and increase this opening here to allow gases to quickly escape and go out the exhaust. Okay, this is the intake side of the port. So this originally had a kind of mechanical fuel injection type system, and so the injector was coming through this hole here. We're going to have to plug this hole because we're running a carburetor. Well, this was just a machined lip, and so there was a poor transition through here. So I just took the grinder and I just smoothed that transition here. I didn't want to go through all the pain and agony of trying to fill this and then have the filler somehow break off and go into there. Just feels better that we just try to smooth the airflow coming on the top of the port, coming down here, hitting this, and then smoothly going into the port. Well, unfortunately my arbor broke, so I can't finish that side of the intake port. But this gives you an idea of what things look like after they're done sanded on the opposite side. We now, I know you can't necessarily feel it, but there used to be a distinct ridge here, and it's all gone. It's a nice smooth radius that allow the airflow to flow very fast and very efficiently through this port. Something else we've done is we've taken this in the solvent tank and we've cleaned the backside of the valves, so all the gunk and everything that built up on the backside is now gone. All the valves are clean, and so since we can't finish the polishing portion because the arbor for our sanding roller has broken, we have to get additional ones of those. We're going to go ahead and lap the valves and show you that part. So you basically just take a valve, let's get focused. You take some valve lapping compound. Doesn't take much, just, whoa. That's more than plenty. We'll use that on the other side. You just put a little bit on there, and then we're going to stick this in the valve we're interested in. Stick our suction cup on there. And we just go to town, going back and forth, allowing that abrasive compound to create a machine surface between the face of the valve and the seat which it's sitting in, to make sure that they're going to seal very well. And so you just kind of move it around every now and again, and you'll hear the grinding sound increase, which means you have kind of new stuff. Then after a while, the sound goes down. So you move it around, you bring more new valve grinding compound between the two. Pop it out. So this is now you can see the seat is like a gray color that's left over from the valve lapping compound. You can see we have that gray color all the way around, which indicates that we have a well machine surface between the two, and it's going to seal. Here is the seat, and you can see again that it has a gray valve lapping compound all the way around, and you can see. Let me just make sure that's in focus, and we can see that it's that it will seal. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is I've decided we're going to port match the intake to the cylinder head, so that when we bolt our intake to the cylinder head, that we know that we're going to have a continuous airflow all the way through. And we do that by first taking Dykem, which, since I didn't have any Dykem, I just used blue spray paint and dab blue on here so we have a good contrasting agent. And then we pick our intake gasket, and we're going to place it on there. We're going to stick our bolts in. We're going to scribe a line to where the intake gasket is, and then we're going to match that to the intake manifold. Okay, so what I'm doing is I've put the bolts in just to kind of help center the gasket. But what I'm doing is I'm using it so that the bolts are going through the center of those holes. Then I'm going to hold this down, take the bolts out, and very carefully take my really sharp scribe and scribe a line into the paint. Again here. And what I can see is that the floor of the port is pretty similar, but the roof definitely needs to be raised some. And then this last one. Then what I'm going to do when I when we go to install this is we're going to kind of glue it down a little bit with some silicone or maybe some spray glue and make sure it's perfectly aligned before we finish it. Before we bolt on the intake and get everything to set up. So I'm just using this as a pattern to scribe lines. And then pull this off and you can see the areas that we're going to have to come back and grind out. So we're going to raise the top of the roof of this port so that it can match with the intake. So just to make sure I keep everything together, I always like to put the intake on, then flip it, just to make sure that I don't accidentally reverse or flip something. Okay, and so we're going to do the opposite here. We might get a little more, yeah, the other way. The bolts do a great job aligning things, so we can use them. So you can see just how relatively misaligned everything was. Here we're going to be taking down the floor, and then on this side we're going to take up the roof. So it's pretty interesting how that worked out. Essentially, I'm really happy we did this because these are pretty well misaligned, and that would have cost us flow and ultimately horsepower. Alright, so now we're going to match the ports. We've already scribed our lines where we need to go to, and I've already done the first one. You can see how much larger it is. Always using a straight edge, trying to make sure the port stays straight, and then so that the port doesn't do some weird thing like that or some weird angle. Because again, you want to keep thinking this air is going to be coming through here at a high velocity, and you don't want anything to kind of trip it up, make it tumble, or lose that velocity. I'm going to do this next one here. When you do this, unfortunately, it's probably better to use pneumatic tools where you can control the speed of the cutter. I don't have that, so we're using this electric one that has just one speed. And you're just going to very lightly come in on the side, hog a little bit, then let up. And it's just very easy on, easy off. Don't put any real pressure on this, very light, and just taking your time to make sure that you can follow this line exactly. If you kind of go in too heavy, too hard, too quickly, you'll end up kind of undercutting here and then making that transition, and it won't look very nice. Okay, we've done some port work, so now we want to double check, make sure we have everything straight. So I'm going to stick my straight edge in here and see, I'm seeing light in this area, which means the angle of my tool's too far this way. I need to back it down this way. And then on the sides here, that looks good. That looks pretty good. There's a small hump in here that I can take out with a couple light strokes. And then you can see we're still following this line. We're not really hogging this way and then that way, so we're good on our pressures, and we're consistently having just taking down this material until we get to that scribe line. All right, so we've done all the ports now. We've used our straight edge to kind of double check and make sure that our port stays straight, that we're not at some weird angle as we come into it. And now we're going to put the cylinder head aside, and we're going to go get the intake and start working on it. All right, so now we're going to do the intake. It's a little harder to hold, so I got a ratchet strap to keep it from moving around, but also up at an angle to where I can easily see and get in there with the grinder. And so we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to use our straight edge. We're going to keep this port as straight as possible, the walls, until we come out and meet the edge that we've scribed, and we're going to do that through all four. All right. Okay, now we're going to start assembling our cylinder head. We have it all cleaned, done on the porting and polishing we're going to do. And so we're going to start by putting this base to have a steel surface to where the spring is going to land, and then also the new valve stems on it. And it's pretty simple. We just stick those there. I'm using a socket to kind of drive the seat. We should just be able to just push them on without a hammer. And so we're just going to do that for the other 7 valves. Okay, now we're going to start putting in the valves. So we're going to flip our cylinder head this way, take our first valve. We've already lapped all the valves. We know where they go. We've already test fit all the stems. So we stick that through. We're going to get our springs, stick those on the other side, and we're going to use this spring compressor to compress the spring, put on our 2 keepers, back it out, and then we tap the top to make sure everything's seated. So I'm going to stop and alright, stick our retainer back on, hold all that together, run our spring compressor in. So we have one part of the spring compressor on the retainer and one part centered in the valve. And we run this down. We drop this a couple times just to give us something to pick up. Okay, so now we have the place where we can install our keepers. We want to make sure they get well seated, and they can be a pain, especially little ones like these. I'm going to get a magnet. Okay, I got this probe which has got a magnetized tip. Have my magnet to help me work a little bit here because it is really small area you're working in. You got to get that keeper on there just right. And, okay, there you can see the 2 keepers on top of the valve stem. So now we're going to back out the spring compressor to put those together. To give an idea what's going on here, we have the valve stem here, And we have the keeper. We want that on the valve stem like that, 2 of them. So that's what we're trying to accomplish inside there. We have the keeper in place. We're going to hold things together as we loosen the valve stem compressor, making sure that everything falls in place. And then we're going to tap the top to make sure everything's seated. And that's it. We're going to do that for the next 7 valves.